you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
So, welcome back to You, Me, and the Elephant with Dr. Deborah Ayer and
Debra.
Crystal Crea. Arr.
I love speaking of voice and sound.
The question for today is, what is your voice telling you?
Great question. As everybody goes blank.
What is it? The whole mind fills up with bullet points right now. What is my voice telling me?
I've heard myself say this a lot, of just wanting to have a deeper, broader voice. There's that feeling of wanting to speak up in places where you have, or I have, let's say, felt too silent, or we've lost our words. Or maybe you're very outspoken and there's some times where you say things that you go, oh, I wish I paused before I said that. There's different ways in which we can look at our voice. The overall point of even speaking about this is I've noticed that in my lifetime, my voice has changed. And I think that was the doorway in for me. And I realized, like, oh, I sound differently. And then I was listening to one of our podcasts and I could hear my voice changing in different moments, like the tempo. Is it more nasally? Is it more throaty? Is it more chesty? So the point is the voice is a way in to noticing and being more aware of what's happening inside for us. And I believe that there are tiny little elephants in there for us to say hello to. And that I think it's an incredible way to discover more about how we are doing in a moment, maybe how we're doing overall, and ways in which we can assess or even consider that it can bring parts out in us that have been wanting to speak or wanting to be felt. I've heard a lot of people, including myself, say, I want to find more of my voice. And I believe that a lot of times when we say that, we're looking for more of us. And I truly believe that the voice is just waiting there, like it's wanting to find us. It's like, how can we look at it almost oppositely and say, what is my voice telling me? The things I'm saying, the things I'm not saying, how I'm saying them. It's very interesting because the voice, although can be heard in the three-dimensional reality, once the voice, the sound is released from our mouth, now sound can come out, voice can come out through words, which are containers that have meanings to them. But within the container of the word is a tone, is an inflection, is all these different things that allow it to have a certain emphasis of meaning and can completely change the meaning. Meaning you can have the same words and bring a different quality of inflection, of tempo, of texture, and it can have a completely different experience of meaning. So when we project that voice out, it's a sound, but also sound has a movement to it and a timing. And so as soon as it's released out of our mouth, there's a part like that has a fourth dimensional quality to it. It's going to shift and change depending on how far away we are. It's going to shift and change as it hits the vibration of our tissues within our body. So there's a morphability that can be very, very powerful.
What stuck out for me when this came up to be a topic and it really hit home was the things that our voice does not say when we're not speaking, when we're not using our voice. What is that telling us? What little elephants are in the non-voicing that desire to be voiced?
Absolutely. I was thinking about over the years how many the people who you are that have come in and received care, and you're the one that's like, why is that person making that sound over there? Or do I have to make that? Or you come to a place and it's hard to imagine even making any sound or saying any word. And it's not about making sound to make sound. It's really about what are those places that have frozen in us that have not had a voice. And oppositely, sometimes we were talking about dubbing, right? Dubbing over. I think our voice can dub over. We can be more skilled at speaking to certain things, then it can be very different in those places that have less of a voice. So those of you that feel that way or have felt that way of like, what am I not saying? Also ask yourself, what are you saying? What are you saying? And what is the meaning? What is the tone? What is the quality? Are you speaking over something? Are you dubbing over a part of yourself? And that voice is extremely powerful because it's the way we communicate. And I think that this discussion is about communicating, allowing yourself to hear the voice as a way of deeper connection with yourself and what's happening, so that it's not only this connection where we can begin to listen. Like, how many people have ever heard themselves being recorded and they're like, oh my God, I hate my voice? I used to say that. I say it less now, which I think there's a reason for that. I think that there is a relationship between being able to stand or listen to our own voice and how much of us and who we are and our love for ourselves and our beingness is in our voice. I also think the other part of this is the more that we can become more intimate with our voice and the tones and the qualities, we can also learn how to communicate more effectively outside in the space with others. I was thinking about sometimes when I'm working with people and I go somewhere deep inside of them and in the field around me. And sometimes I'm so in that when I ask them to turn their head, I'm really soft because I'm in this other plane of existences simultaneously and they can't hear me. And I go, oh, I realize it's a cue to me to go, wow, I was somewhere else. I may be taking them with me in the somewhere else, but in the form of that moment, I got almost too in that and less aware of the three-dimensional space right around me. So I wasn't matching the tone that was required or even the volume that was required for this person to hear me. So it's a really interesting dance of how we use our voice and how, I mean, let's face it, sometimes when we feel nervous, we start talking a little bit faster, and we're just like, let's just get this done with, let me just da la la la, let's do this thing. Or sometimes I notice that if I'm at home and I'm super chill and I'm relaxed and I'm speaking to somebody or leaving them a message, my quality of my voice is different. It's more open, it's more free, it has more treble and bass to it, it has more space. And sometimes when I'm even here talking to you, Crystal, I may talk a little faster, I may get a little nasalier, I may get a little more mentally speaking, because I'm also wanting to create something with you that is useful to people. So that might hit something in me. There's the elephant that says you have to present yourself a certain way to be valued and for people to even want to listen to you.
I appreciate the invitation in. You had said the invitation in for listening to your voice is that it's telling you more about you. And that's what you're speaking to. You're like, how can we? And then the desire is for people to say, I just want to find my voice and so let's say that is probably a universal truth. Like that could be something that more than likely every single person on the planet could be like, whether they would say it in that phrase or not, they can resonate with, yeah, I just want to like speak my truth. I just want to use my voice or the language that I communicate and the way that I communicate, I want to be able to take what is on the inside and express it on the outside. And what we're
Mhm.
saying is like, as we're doing that, observe those invisible threads that are coming from the inside into the outside. If you observe them, then you can go back in and say, oh, okay, where did that come from? What was that tone, pitch, quality, vibration also giving me back? And that exchange is the beautiful dance, because it's not just about, I'm going to use my voice to project this thing out into the abyss or at the other person, and then it never comes back to me.
Mm.
And what you're speaking to is that that's probably the point of speaking in the first place. is that is that it is meant for
There's an
you.
exchange. There's an
Yeah.
exchange.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And so how can we get more intimate with that, right? How can
Yeah.
we look at that and feel that? And there's many qualities to the voice. So the tone, we talk about tone, and sometimes we talk about this with our kids, like watch that tone. But our
Mm-hmm.
tone is really something that I believe anyways is like the fingerprint of us. It is the quality, the tone, that I think there's an aspect of tone that stays with us even as we grow and our voice may change over time. It's like the color of you. If you could
Mm-hmm.
imagine your voice being a color, what color would it be? And sometimes it's different shades of that color, perhaps. It's a little bit darker, it's a little bit more poignant, but the tone is that reflection of who we are, that
Mm-hmm.
fingerprint. It's the thing that lands in somebody. It's the thing that is you, where people go, oh, I know who that is.
That's right. As soon as they hear your voice, even if it's after been a long time, that's true. I never really thought about that, but yeah, like a blueprint. I like that.
Totally. And then, depending on how you know that tone or that fingerprint or that
Mm-hmm.
blueprint, we then add these things like resonance. And I mentioned this before, that their voice goes out, right? And it hits the air particles. And as it hits the air particles in time and space, it shifts. And basically, people are just hearing these movements. The movement in with the tonal quality is this resonance, like you drop a pebble in the water and the ripples, right? It's like there's a resonance that happens if you're getting up on stage and you're wanting to project and you're saying, hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Deb Air and I'm here to speak about the voice, your voice. It's not, the resonance may not meet the room. It may not be like rippling out enough. And so I think there is that quality of what are you in resonance with? So if we feel out of resonance, we're feeling conflicted, that will show up in our voice. There'll
Mm-hmm.
be almost like a dissonant quality. I don't really want to say this, or like you said, what am I not saying? Or am I forcing myself
Mm-hmm.
to say this? Sometimes when we're really in a growth point and we're trying to quote unquote speak up, I've noticed this with myself in the past when it's brand new. I'm like, I'm gonna charge at it like a hippo or a bull. I'm like, yeah, so I'm gonna do this. And my voice gets tighter, it gets louder, but it's because it's new and it's a little tighter and it's not quite in the resonance of the piece and the ownership of what I'm trying to do. So it's almost more like a bull in a china shop. If I walk into the library, I don't say, hey everybody, what's up? Where do I go to get this book?
Mm-hmm.
I notice what is happening with the resonance of the room, with the resonance of myself, and I kind of adapt to that. And so there's a resonance piece that I think is really important. How are you resonating? And if you are feeling tight or your throat is feeling constricted, you know, how can you get your hands on your body for a moment and just like connect and take a breath and just see what kind of reveals itself? And we'll talk a moment about some of the things that we do to practice really getting to know and using sound as actually a preemptive way of accessing life energy. So, inflection is another aspect of voice. How you emphasize, how you release the words or the
Mm-hmm.
sound matters. So, I can ask you, Crystal, Hey, Crystal, can you help me for a sec? I can also say, hey, Crystal, hey, can you help me for a second? That has a little bit more urgency. It kind of projects this feeling like maybe I already feel like she should be helping me. And it's like there's almost that projection, even though I'm saying the same words. And so this is where we want to look at, yes, words are important. The us that we're putting inside of our words is the voice, is the tone, is the sound, the tone, the resonance, the inflection, the tempo. If I'm speaking too quickly, when I was younger, I was known for speaking a lot and speaking. If I was very excited about something, I was speaking really fast and it was a little bit nutty. Now, sometimes I feel like I almost go the opposite way. I can speak if I'm in a space of expansion and of sort of soul space, I will be speaking much slower in the three-dimensional reality anyways, because I'm receiving this information and it's coming in. But if I am wanting to communicate with you, me slowing down too much might lose you. So you really want to look at, like, am I speaking to myself in this moment? Am I thinking to myself? Am I talking out loud to myself? Or am I speaking to somebody else? And how can I meet the tempo that really seems like it fits the tone? Like if I'm running in a race and I'm running past somebody, I say, hey, it's going to be a little bit quicker. It's going to be a little bit higher. And so, tempo, are you just moving fast? And is your voice now fast? How can your voice prompt you to go, oh, wait a minute, I need a moment just to slow down for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
And it maybe if I can just even slow down my words for a moment, that will actually help me resonate with sound and slow down in my cellular physiology as well.
If we go back to the untether exercise, because I keep playing this in my mind, and I remember how when this was set up, we had
The Untether is the women's workshop, by the way, just
That's
for
right.
those who don't know what we're talking about.
I know there was the one where we pulled the words, but the one where we were going around going, can you help me, please?
Mm-hmm.
Was that phrase matched with the emotion that we pulled? That's what it was, right? And so there was something about that. If you'll speak to that a little bit more, because I think that goes perfectly with what your voice is trying to tell you. And it's bringing up how many different responses that we got when we had folks say, well, when I have to say it that way, I don't like that. I don't like how that feels in me. And it was revealing to them. And I just remember the ahas. Not only did we have in ourselves, but others were reporting the ahas of, wow, I didn't know I could say it like that. And how did that feel in your body when you made just the same phrase over and over again, but with the different emotions? We didn't say, like, in order to have a rage emotion, it must sound and feel like that. But when you tell someone to access rage in their body or frustration in their body, and then they say that same phrase, they showed up with that tone and pitch and texture and quality that met the moment. And it was very revealing.
Absolutely. I think the first piece of this is really giving the love and nurturing to your voice, and just trust that your voice is truly magnificent exactly how it is, and that when you begin to recognize tone, resonance, inflection, tempo, texture, just notice it, just observe it. Is there something revealing in your voice and all those things that are kind of giving you a landmark of where you're at? And is there some attention that your life, your body, your being wants? Also, is it like, wow, I nailed that. I feel really congruent. Is there a mismatch? Did I just say something and be like, why the fuck did I just say that? I didn't really mean that. So I just really wanted to kind of point that out, because what you're talking about is fantastic, and it's more of a way that we can harness and take our voice into the realm of practicing energizing our body with different kinds of energy that can empower us to utilize and grow our voice,
Mm-hmm.
because that's such a request I hear all the time. I
Yeah.
just need to find my voice. And like I said, I'll go back to saying, and your voice is trying to find you too. And it reveals, it's like talking to you through the tightness of your throat. Is there air and space between that? Is there a nasally quality? Is it really mindy? Is it in your chest, your throat? And so to go back to what you were saying, Crystal, what we did in this workshop is we took one question. So we used a container of a question and we said, we're going to actually preemptively access different emotion. And so a person would pick an emotion, and it could be a pleasant emotion, it could be a vibrant emotion, it could be a not as comfortable emotion. We had them all mixed in there. So I may have picked majestic. So I'm actually going in there, and sometimes it's hard for us to say, oh, okay, how many times has it been hard when you feel angry? Or maybe you're the person that says, like, I just don't get angry, which is always a bit of a red flag, honestly, because anger is part of our humanity. And I think tucked in the center of anger is things we're deeply passionate about. To go back to that, where I think sometimes it's hard to just say, okay, I'm going to be angry. And I know that, and there's people that I've talked about in giving them exercises like, okay, when you get in the car, just scream, just make a sound. Now I really try to even make it more embodied. I say, take a song. This is what we kind of did in this workshop, but we use this question, take a song and move your body and see if that song can help stimulate that experience. And what we're speaking to is giving a broader bandwidth and variety to what you can feel in the sound, because that's going to give you more life to work with in your voice, and therefore inadvertently finding more of yourself. So when we said here, I pick majestic and I say, can you help me? I might also pick anxious. I'll be like, can you help me? Maybe I do pick rage and I'm like, can you help me? There's different tone, resonance, tempo to all these things. So it's a way to practice literally. And what you said, Crystal, is some people are like, wow, this was really same question,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm having a really hard time asking this question. That's telling me, that's telling ourselves that we're having a hard time with accessing that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's revealing, but as a practice, you cannot lose. You cannot
Yeah.
lose to really,
Yeah. And
my
you can doing
suggestion
it
is
solo. You can do it solo too.
absolutely
And
in
like,
the
and that's
mirror. In
right.
the mirror is
And
great.
it's not so much of like the point of, can you help me, please? It wasn't like the act. There was no one that had to actually do the helping, but it was to access the emotion behind the ask, which is where some folks, there was one woman that I was working with, she just froze. She was like, I don't know how to ask. I'm not comfortable with that emotion. I don't know how to ask that. So her voice right there would have stopped. Right. But what did that reveal to her? And she was like, oh, so like that is why this practice to me spoke so much with the voice, because it was the feedback. What was her voice trying to tell her? What did her voice want for her? And she had to recognize silence in order to get her voice to come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I suggest having a wide variety. If you're going to do this and do it in the mirror or with somebody else, that you pick a wide,
Mm-hmm.
colorful range of emotions. We are so clustered into this small point of I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. That's kind of about it. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
anxious. Like make it big, make it broad,
Mm-hmm.
playful, majestic,
Yeah.
mysterious, sensual. I
Yeah.
mean, I could go on and on and on. Look it up. Look up, like, what are all the different experiences and feelings we can have, and practice them. And to speak to the when it feels hard, because this brings it into, the question brought it very like you said, it was a practice. So no one had to do anything, but the practice was using a phrase, right, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to find an emotion within
That's right.
ourselves.
Yep.
Now, sometimes, as you said, Crystal, that's hard. So one of the things that we also did is just play around with sound, and that different sounds without having to put them into a word. And if you can preemptively practice these things, I think it gives us more of the resonance that we become more familiar with in our body, which then in turn will help us find more of ourselves in our voice. There are many different ways to practice sound. There are kirtans where people call in response, where the tone and the emotions are elicited through the prayers. There are many different ways in which we can use sound, but just some of the simple ways that we have used this is, if you're wanting to, and again, you can just do this as a practice. You don't have to be in a state to do this other than the state of existence. And I think that the more we can practice these things, again, the more your body gets familiar with the resonance of these things, and that reveals the emotions. So it's another way in compared to what we're just talking about with the question, can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first sound is that expansion. It's kind of, even when I make the sound, I straighten my arms, I bring them over my head. Sometimes I tilt my head back and I lift my chest up. And it really is a way of resonance, of soul resonance, of gratitude, of love. And that sound, when I do that, is ah. And you can feel, or at least I can feel in my body, there's an openness. I felt energy in my chest. I felt an expansiveness around me. That's something you can do for free anytime you want. Now, sometimes we need to project more. We don't want to be, when we're up on stage or we're really having an important conversation, we don't want to pretend we're on our couch just sipping tea and speaking slowly and in this rhythm. That we want to be able to project. And one of the sounds we can make that allows for projection, there's different ways we can do that, is ha. We can extend it, ha, or we can bring some playful, like, emotion. I've heard so many times, I want to learn how to project myself out there. And this is an energy that you can practice that brings some power and projection into the embodiment of your tones and of your quality and of the resonance of you. Another one, I'm keeping it super simple, is it can either just be and this is more like bringing that energy in a very grounded space. Sometimes when we feel less grounded, we start speaking faster and we get maybe a little higher pitched, and we're just like, so the or it's vroom. Either way, it has a. And if you just practice with us for a moment and direct that energy down into the sacral and root chakras, into the pelvic floor. Mm, vroom, vroom, mm. 3 sounds you can do. For me, when I just did it, I don't know about you if you practice it. If not, just rewind this part. Can you feel a different resonance in your tissues, literally in your body? You don't have to know, other than that one is an expanding quality, one is a projecting quality, and one is a grounding quality. And then what if you started practicing after that 3 ohms? Ohm is sort of almost all of those. It's the universal sound that allows you to connect with the universe. So what if that was your practice for a week, just practicing sound? The ah, ha, hum, just doing this, even the little bit that I did and speaking to you all, I feel more space within me. I feel more connection and congruence between what I'm experiencing on the inside and what's coming out of my mouth. It feels more of a body voice. I don't know about you. How did that land for you? You
Yeah,
look different.
and I love going back to the practice part of it because I can see how, let's say this was a morning practice before my day began, just as important as brushing my teeth. How different would I apply my voice throughout the day? And so, as you were doing the exercise, I didn't do it at the same time just for like the vocal piece, but the witnessing of it, having done it before, automatically turned on that resonance in me that said, oh, that works. How powerful would it be if it was a warm up? I mean, we've witnessed this, people going on stage with not only showing up to present the information, but showing up energy wise and needing to be grounded, but also project from a soul like space. It's like these are exercises that I'm sure even vocal performance folks get on stage. Like it's a
Absolutely.
practice. It's a
Mhm.
practice because what your voice, as it's coming out of your body, it's also going in to your audience and coming back for you. So it's kind of like you really want to have that coherence for yourself so that that coherence will also go out into the world.
Absolutely. This is like the stage of your life. You made me think about just even how sound healing is becoming a really powerful tool out there
Mhm.
in healing modality because it's starting to vibrate your cells in certain frequencies. And I think that that is also powerful. But also, how can you actually make those sounds yourself? You don't
Mhm.
have to be a singer. You
Mhm.
don't have to feel like you love your voice. But I would guess that if you start practicing even those sounds that we just made, you will start to like your voice more, which I think translates in liking yourself more, truthfully. The voice just becomes a meter of how stressed do you feel? What are your patterns that I notice this, my God, I love to say, and I love to say like. I'm noticing the patterns that I have used and they're hard to break. And that's why sometimes I just pause, but I'll still say them, when I'm
Yeah,
holding back. I just said, I've learned different fillers
that's right. That's
of
what I was going to
in
say. Space filler. As you
space
said.
filler.
Yep.
And it's still hard. And again, I'm learning that through having these conversations with you, Crystal. So it's really fun to look at. And this is a real fun one for me because I've practiced it in all these different ways. And I'm just sort of going into it more and more and saying, what can this reveal for us? And how can we really play and practice with our voice and our tones and not say, hey, I'm a quiet person who doesn't speak or I'm totally outspoken. How can we get to know the resonance within us to really, like you said a moment ago, create more coherent conversation and connection with others, including myself? It matters what we say, not just the words, but how we're saying them. And it does reveal a lot about who we are and where we
Absolutely.
are in a moment. So I hope you enjoyed this sort of discovery process of how our voice can leave us little pretty elephants to tag where we're at and how we can practice and dance with our voice in a way that hopefully reveals a feeling of more empowerment for you too and a more likability and access of even greater and deeper powerful communication with others. I wanted to say one thing that has not to do with this. So is there anything else you want to say about this particular conversation, Crystal?
Mm,
Miss Clear?
just that every time these conversations happen, that little beautiful piece of grace is there. And my eye went to the challenge, I think, with the voice for me, the parts where it's when my voice is not speaking when I'm not using my voice. What does that mean? And having the conversation in this way has provided even more compassion and grace for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Now I remembered an example I wanted to share.
On
Just
that
when we
note,
thought we were finished, you're like, all right, we're done this podcast. Well, it feels like a great personal example of how this can provide deeper connection with others as well as self, but in particularly in this case with others, where I was at a healing retreat and I was with my mom. I talked about being pulled off the table and I was in this state of ecstasy and I was making a sound with that. It was very expansive. And I was laying down on the floor and I was in a very expansive state. And moments later, I felt my mom hold my hand and she gripped it. It was out of resonance. Like, so her touch was really out of resonance from where I was at, meaning it was just hard and firm. And she whispered in my ear and said, I can feel your pain. And so, how does somebody that you are so connected to, like in this case, my mom was one of my very best friends, that I'm so connected to, that when I'm in a state of ecstasy, that she feels or perceives that I'm in pain? How is that so incongruent? It's because we have limited our sound expression. Like I was just saying with emotions, we've limited it. And when we limit the tone, I believe that the more range of tone and quality we can practice, the more range and quality we can experience within our body and within our life. And so up to that point, my mom didn't know that frequency and that range. And so it had to go into all she knew. And she thought that I was in pain because of it. So how many times are we having conversations that are misunderstood or we feel misunderstood because we said something and you're like, that's not what I said. And they're like, but that's what I heard. So that's just an example. Then the other thing I wanted to share was that we're going to begin to invite people on. So you won't just be hearing from Crystal and I, that we're going to invite some of our friends onto the podcast and you, me, and the elephant and see where we go from there. So look forward to that. I know we are. Until then.
Until then.
And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.